Welcome to Playing with Inference, a podcast with Ramon and Aaron here talking about the intersection of generative AI and the game industry and how that's going to change things and the people that are actually making those changes. We're excited to be here at the Supercell offices today as a kind of special episode.
Because today we're talking to Otto Söderlund. His background in his own words are, he's a computer nerd since a kid, then software engineer for many years until he turned to the dark side and became a businessman. 15 years as a founder. His latest startup was a speech recognition startup that he sold to Roblox. And now he is an AI lead at Supercell. What does that even mean, Otto?
That's a good question. Hello, thanks for having me on the show. Really appreciate it. So AI lead, it's a fancy sounding title, but what it actually means is that I'm overlooking all of our AI related initiatives. And at Supercell, we've divided our AI initiatives into three buckets. The first one is that we want to really give superpowers to our employees, so making our developers more effective using AI coding, making our creatives more creative and faster using Gen AI tools, and overall automating a lot of the work. So that's one part, superpowers. The second part is actually automating a lot of our live operations, starting from user acquisition to live ops monetization to player care and those kinds of functions. So using AI in smart ways to work smarter there. And then the third area is then thinking about how AI actually impacts our product portfolio. So how is AI brought into the games and what kinds of new games can actually be innovated using AI, something that wasn't possible before, and even beyond that, what kind of entertainment experiences you can actually imagine using the IP that we've built to create novel kinds of player experiences. So it's a pretty wide scope, interesting things.
And you're personally focused on all three areas?
Yes. So of course I have teams looking under many topics there, but...
Would you say it's pretty balanced in the amount of investment or effort that Supercell's putting into these areas, or is there kind of one area that's in the lead at the moment?
I think that it's pretty balanced, because for us to be able to run the AI transformation for the whole company, we need to take everything into account. If we would only do the employee tooling and operations, then we wouldn't be looking at the future. It would be more like very practical. And if we would only be doing the future innovation things, then we would be a little bit high-flying, maybe like off the ground. So it's very important for us to have a balanced approach of actually working very tangibly and closely on a day-to-day basis on the tooling side and the operations side, but at the same time also really trying to identify and understand the opportunities that this technology creates to our industry.
So one thing that it's clear to me is that part of your role is very outside facing. I've been to a couple of your meetups, today one of them. And now you are opening an AI innovation lab, is that what I heard? What role does that play in these three categories? How does that follow? How do you marry that with the inward looking efforts that you're doing?
Yeah, so for us, looking at totally novel kinds of experience is very important. And when you're doing that in a company that has been the innovator in the industry, and Supercell has the heritage of actually being one of the first companies heavily riding the free-to-play wave, and was back in the days was a little bit overlooked by existing incumbents. So it's like Challenger that has created and found something special. And we are a company where we've actually been able to replicate the success of building big $1 billion plus games in a repeatable manner. So that's great for those kinds of games. But the moment you're starting to build something that is totally different, something that somebody might not even call a game, it's actually not always easy to build that in that kind of setting. So that's why we've established the AI Innovation Lab as a separate entity, a little bit disconnected from the mothership, so that we can really bring a little bit different kinds of profiles there to actually work on some like totally crazy ideas and protect them from the normal processes, the normal expectations, and give them an opportunity to really do some interesting things.
Just to make sure I understand, so when we talk about the AI Innovation Lab, is this internal to Supercell, external? Is there an internal and external component?
Excellent question. It actually contains both.
Okay.
So we have the external AI Innovation Lab is our innovation program. It's a program that lasts for 10 weeks. We had the first batch in Helsinki. Now we're just going to launch today the next batch in San Francisco. It's a program where we'll actually bring in builders from outside Supercell into a program. They can come in, they can have ideas, they can have their IP, they can keep their IP, and then in the program they have the opportunity to actually work on those ideas and accelerate those ideas. And we want this program to be the most productive time of their lives, so that no distractions, no blockers, all the resources that you need, and faith in creating something crazy. And then we also have an internal AI innovation lab where we will then bring people to work projects together with us so that we really put them working closer to our game designers who have been building the, let's say, current generation of mobile big games there. So we're actually having both ones.
So on Crazy, and on this, because I just remembered, you also hosted a hackathon. We actually talked to the winning team yesterday. And so if you haven't seen the winning team, they basically have like a Wolfenstein, like the original Wolfenstein, but you can actually create your own weapons by typing them, and then you can just, I don't know, I want a cat, and then it just creates a cat, and you squeeze it, and that's your gun. Yeah. That sounds crazy. So I'm curious, since you have been looking inwards, but also outwards, and you're doing the hackathons, the meetups, now the Innovation Lab, what do you want to see in the Innovation Lab? What are some crazy ideas that are being worked on that you can actually talk about, or crazy ideas that are not being talked about, but that you would love to see?
Very, very good. So we are looking for outlier ideas, and we're looking for those crazy ideas that people have been trying to build and that are super ambitious, and maybe they've tried to pitch to people and people have turned them down and they've gotten rejected many times, but they still believe in those ideas. So something that can actually be radically different than what we think. So we're kind of also trying to bend the kind of definition of what we mean with games. So we're trying to talk more about future entertainment experiences. So why would people spend time in an entertainment purpose with a digital product?
There's so much here already for me to unpack, because I want to talk about the entertainment side, because for what it's worth, I think there's an interesting space where, particularly with generative AI, we do tend to blend the kind of entertainment experiences, and we've talked to some folks that are more coming from it more from a film side, and we see actually some overlap in the kind of experimentation there. Of course, we've also talked that like video games just took over, like it's interactive entertainment, so it's always a video game, so that counts, right? But so I'm interested in that space, but I want to talk a little bit about what's holding the people back, right? And what the Innovation Lab is going to have, because one of the things that we've talked about is whether costs. And we've talked about this from an indie perspective. If I'm going to build an AI game right now, it can be expensive. There's some programs out there, but I may need access to some GPUs or just a lot of tokens. And even a lot of major studios are sitting on the sidelines sometimes just because of the cost. So when I talk to other studios in the space, like costs are one of the main things. So I'm curious, like, maybe that's one of the things you're thinking of being able to help these studios. What is that the primary one? Are there additional things that you think are like, what's holding back this innovation, and how are you going to help unlock it?
Yeah, really good question. First of all, it changes a little bit on the phases of the innovation cycle. So we're thinking of it from 3 phases. So we have the from 0 to 80% phase, which is the really prototyping. And then we have the 80 to 100 phase, which is really the kind of polishing and like really finalizing the product. And then we have the live ops phase. And then it really, the kind of the blockers change in these different phases. So they're totally different types of blockers. And what we are seeing is that the value that we want to bring to these ones is that in the early stages, one of the learnings we had from the Helsinki AI Innovation Lab is that when you bring these amazing AI builders that are like super talented in building crazy things, and it can be sometimes a bit hard for them to create fun. And that's something on that hand. I don't come from gaming, I come from like startup world, and for me that's wow, okay, so how do we get the fun? And one of my most like biggest challenges for me, which is intellectually pretty exciting, is that I'm trying to figure out like how on earth I'm gonna be able to extract the fun, because at Supercell I know that we know fun, we've done it before, but I have no clue what it is in practice. So I'm trying to figure out how do I marry that implicit knowledge of fun with these crazy builders here, and how do I bring them together to actually build something that is really fun. So
I think that has been, so I don't come from the gaming industry either, so this has been a process of learning for me as well. And one of the key challenges that I've faced has been confusing the fun of building a particular game and the concept of that game. So for example, when I started, I was doing this social deception game, and the concept of fooling AI NPCs into believing you yourself are an AI sounds fun. But in the practice, the concept ended up being much more fun, the actual interaction with it. And I wonder if that's something to people who come from outside the industry, if that's something that fall into rather quickly in the confusing the fun of the building versus the fun of playing.
I think that is a very good question. as a newbie to the industry, for me, I'm looking at it from the product perspective. So fully like if you're building a product and you're iterating and you're talking to customers, how do you measure? How do you validate fun? How do you make the process of actually creating these prototypes and getting these ideas and quickly validating them as effective and fast as possible? So that's kind of like my perspective to the fun. Of course, it's great that the process is fun, and at least the AI teams at Supercell, we laugh all the times of our lives there. So,
Right.
so it's crazy, but we really want to emphasize and focusing on the player experience. So that's really like how to make fun experiences for the players. That's what we're obsessed.
Yeah, we, in this podcast and in general, I think one of the areas, you said it, Ramon, as well too, that intersection between machine learning and AI and the game industry creates a lot of learning on both sides. And we see it on both sides. Like when I talk to game designers and that have a intuition around what is fun and how to find it, does not mean they have an intuition around how to work with this technology, right? And I've long said one of the reasons I love games is just it's this kind of interdisciplinary space where you have art and music and narrative and technology all thrown together, and no one person knows it all. So that's I'm excited about too. The one thing that what we found, because our team was more from the game side, is, and this is just advice for anyone that's building, is one bit of advice we get is we worked in engine from the beginning as much as possible. That might sound maybe obvious, but I find that with generative AI, some folks it's just so accessible to open up Claude or open up ChatGPT and start typing and being like, look, I got this response back. I'm sure I can represent this in a game engine very easily. And that can sometimes be more challenging. So we play tested all the time internally as a game experience as opposed to a technology experience. And that's something I think we have a long background. We'll try to have a long background in the game industry. I'm sure Supercell has it, but I'm sure that the Innovation Lab, there'll be some folks that'll be a little new to them.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. My founder instinct tells me that we should be so heavily focusing on really iterating all the time. And that's something that I'm trying to bring. That's also one of the value propositions. You were asking earlier, what can we bring? What's unblocking? So one of the learnings we had from the first batch was also that these technical builders, they're amazing, but they have the typical engineering tendency of you just waiting for it to polishing it. Whereas my founder instinct is like pushing. Now you get out of the building, you go talk to people, you play, you have your friends and family and colleagues, everybody like just put it out. And so that's also something that we're going to now change in the program of the San Francisco AI Innovation Lab program, where we will be more heavily supporting the teams in designing and executing the playtest earlier, and we'll also be helping them to do a little bit smarter scoping of what is the right MVP.
So is the goal that it was a 10-week program, right?
Yes.
Are you expecting launchable games by the end of that? Of course, that would be great, but like, what kind of expectations are you setting for the folks that are applying for it? What's the bar there for that?
Yeah, in the pilot we were exploring a little bit different kind of maturity level. In the first batch we had actually people that just had an idea and they were passionate about it, and then we had at the other extreme we had actually like companies that had been established, they hadn't raised funding rounds but had established, had been working on it, so they had already a prototype. And we had different types of effects. For the ones who had an idea, the expectations we had for them, one was really to bring that into something that can be properly play tested by the end of the batch. So that was the decision for them. Whereas then for like internal play testing, whereas for the more mature companies, we had a little bit more ambitious goals. Now, for the San Francisco batch, we are again expecting both of them. In 10 weeks time, we don't expect that in 10 weeks any of those games would be ready for like actual like public launch, like global launches, of course.
You're going to let them sleep a little.
Just a little. Only on Sunday afternoons. Yes.
All right.
But we will also, when that happens, we have the kind of muscle and the engine then to help them do that. So we want to find people who are really obsessed about the products and they want to do it, and we can take care of everything else, all of the boring, stupid stuff that they need so that they can really focus on the product. So product builders are what we're looking for.
What is the boring stuff?
Boring stuff is like user acquisition and operations, that kind of thing.
Organizing playtests is a lot of work.
Yeah, it is.
Right, it is. And so, yeah, if there was help for those type of things.
Yes.
That's a question for both of you. How do you see playtesting different from the user interview or the user, experience search that you get with normal products that are not games? Like how they're both products, but they're...
Players will tell you very directly if it was fun or not fun. It takes some interpretation, always. It's one of the challenges so the example I'll draw on is like League of Legends, right? You have to be careful of what part of the audience you listen to, right? Sometimes the most loud audience is not what is best for your loudest audience, or even your most engaged audience, isn't necessarily best for the game as a whole. So it takes some interpretation of the data. But I think in some cases it's sometimes a bit easier to get people because you're like, hey, you want to go play a game? Let's go play a game. As opposed to, will you test my tax software?
Yeah.
So you can usually round some people up. It's important to really understand, like, survey information to compare, like, what are their favorite games, right? What games do they resonate with? And then how do they take this experience and compare it to those games? That can also tell a lot, because you might think that you're building a game. We found this, for example, in developing Palia at Singularity 6, that there were times when the games that they played were not always the games we expected them to be playing for what it resonated. And so you can find a lot sometimes there of either something you weren't expecting or aspects of the way people are interpreting the game that you didn't expect. Because that's the other part is, players will take games and make it their own.
Yeah.
So you'll see that even in the playtest process.
I think this is really fascinating. Me, not coming from gaming, coming from the more kind of like traditional startup product building perspective, this is really fascinating. I wanted to actually ask you, like in the very early stages, when the product is like very minimal, and especially when you're optimizing, just taking something to the customers.
Yeah.
So how does that differ? Because what you're like, of course, people want to play when you actually have a game, but in the early things, when you have your early MVPs, they are just such a tiny slice. So how do you motivate and how do you learn from that?
So this is also where usually we try to play test with game insiders first, if we can, because they will tend to have this is when it's still like a vertical slice or a gray box, right? We haven't done any art. It is cubes and other just random assets in there. And game developers will be more attuned to be able to see past that. Even then it can be hard. It can still be very difficult, even if, and you have personally gone through this experience. But sometimes you can get your best feedback from folks, your very earliest demos from folks who are already attuned to seeing past that. If you don't, you can still get some folks, but you got to recognize, like, everyone's going to, even if you tell them to look past all the gray cubes and pretend that gray cube is really like a house or something, that's going to be difficult. But you want to play test at that level and that early. And that's your other point. It's like, people wait. No, this game is going to look horrible. You would never want to show it to any family members. You would never want to show it to anyone that you cared what they thought about you. Because if you wait that long, you've waited too long.
Exactly. If you feel comfortable showing it, then you have waited too long.
No.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, and you can look through different focuses. So you think about your gameplay loop. A lot of time we try to break it through like a minute, like you segments. This is just one of many ways to do it, but minute to minute, hour to hour, second to second, minute to minute, hour to hour. What type of cycle are you looking for? And do you see the kind of play reinforcement patterns in that particular segment? You may only have your minute to minute down and your second to second is horrible, and you just need to be aware of that.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question, but those are things that come to the top of my head.
A total tangent, but somehow trying to bring it back to AI.
Oh yeah, there's AI stuff too.
On the gray boxes, I think I keep thinking that one of the things I would love to see from something like an AI innovation lab is a focus on being able to fill in the gap so that I can make a gray box and then AI puts that last layer, last render. Like when people talk about all of these world models, I'm not super enthused about the world model as a game, but I'm very excited about the idea of an AI render that just takes my gray box and does the last cleanup so you can show it to a family member and they don't disinherit you.
One interesting project we're now having in this space is that, of course, many of our developers, the early game teams and the live game teams are working with different kind of AI development technologies, especially when you're in the early phases and you're prototyping something and just want to move like super quickly. On the other work piece, we have built our own tooling for leveraging some of the creative AI models. And what we're now working on is that we are deploying those tools as an MCP tool for the coding agents so that they can actually fill in the gray boxes just easily, so that you can actually, when you're doing the prototypes, it can easily access all of the models that we already have created for the company, with the intention of being really quickly able to take the prototype like one step further into something that people can get the feeling out of.
Yeah, because that's already, if you compare like the tech, mentality of you just put the crappiest product right away and people will, even if it's, what's the name of the framework that everybody uses, the original Twitter one? Anyway, Bootstrap? No. Is it Bootstrap? Anyway, crappy framework. As long as it does their taxes, people will serve the need, so they'll use it. In games, there's a lot of things you have to check before you can test something. But if you can bring down the time it takes to put it into people's hands, that's already a big advantage.
Increase the iteration. That's exactly what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that we're going to see a lot of changes in that space. We already do. And for the Innovation Lab, are you then looking at primarily games that are being developed? Because we talked a little bit about these kind of innovations. Or are you going to take that idea and apply it to the Innovation Lab? There you go. Right? So are you going to look at these kind of workflow and productivity stuff as well? Or is it mostly let's just focus on that player experience game side?
So one of the learnings from the first program was, in that program, we were open for games and entertainment, and in a way, actual end-user consumer products and the developer tooling. So it was like a pretty wide. And what ended up happening is that the participants were heavily focused more on the gaming side, and probably because of our brand and our reach and that. So that was one thing. And then what we also learned was that many of the companies, they started the program by actually wanting to build a game, but then throughout the program, they actually pivoted into a developer tool type of an approach. So this time out, we tried to emphasize more actual like consumer products and trying to pivot those if needed throughout the program. But I would expect there might be some leakage into some tooling, which is a pretty typical pattern, it seems.
So when you say consumer, you mean like consumer apps, or you mean games?
No, I mean games. I mean games and entertainment, but just like it's the end user, the player experience, rather than any tooling for developers.
Gotcha. Okay. Just wanted to clarify.
Yeah. Thanks.
I want to talk also. So while we're on this topic of the type of experiences that could be had, what do you imagine games will be like in the future because of this? Give us a crystal ball. Like,
where do I put my money and my time?
Yeah. So first of all, at Supercell, we have always been focusing on the teams, and we have very empowered teams. I think that the best bet to find that is actually to be able to assemble the best teams and give them the creative freedom and resource and everything. So I think that's how it will come. What it will be, I'm not sure. But the topics where I'm very bullish is I'm very bullish on, for example, different kinds of interactive experiences. If you look at, for example, what's happening in the app stores, how people are spending their time and what categories are growing fastest, and what the young people are doing, especially they're spending a lot of time interacting with different kinds of assistants and different kinds of virtual companions. And that combination with, for example, our IP, something where I see like a massive opportunity. But what it is, we'll have to know, because it needs to be something that fits the Supercell way of doing things and Supercell way of building products. We'll figure it out. So that's one place, one thing that I'm pretty excited about. Another kind of big topic where I'm pretty excited about is the whole providing players with tooling to be creative, and then the creation actually becoming part of the game, and that kind of like creating this kind of viral loop where players will become builders, and then actually that building, the kind of Lego block effect, that is actually part of the game. And I think that I'm fascinated by how that can unleash the creativity also of the players, not only of the devs.
Yeah, I've probably mentioned it tons of times in the podcast, but it's like Carl says, my show horse that I keep talking about. Because someone, actually Nilo, I met him, I saw him, he demoed here at your meetup, and he mentioned something playful creation. And that word stuck to with me. And I think I keep describing playful creation for this interaction that you have with, for example, ChatGPT when you're writing fan fiction, or Midjourney when you're like drawing your own things, or when you're vibe coding. Like all of these are little game mechanics. They're like putting coins on a slot machine, and then you roll the thing, and it comes out. Nobody really cares about the image you created with Midjourney, but for you, something special, right? Exactly. You're right. Yeah. And what I keep thinking is, if that's a game mechanic, then someone has to build an actual game around that core mechanic.
Yes, I agree. I'm pretty sure that there will be more of those kind of creativity games. I don't know like what's the future sandbox or whatever those will become, but I'm really bullish of those ones.
When we started at Jam&T, we felt that we wanted to focus first on like a flagship game experience, right? Like a more polished game experience. We weren't quite sure whether we wanted to tackle UGC or player creation initially. And we've changed our minds on that in a couple of regards. And it wasn't even so much the market, it was the technology itself. So maybe this seems obvious to everybody else, but one of our takeaways, so games already, sometimes you can have games create emergent fun in lots of ways. There's a lot of sandbox games, for example, Minecraft you create inside of it, right? But you can even look at other types of GTA or other kind of games where there's kind of this emergent creation of content that's happening in the course of playing the game, particularly when you give players some agency. I would argue that when a game when you infuse a game with generative AI so that the game can respond to the players more directly and create content or follow on the content, then the game itself, whether you intended it or not, becomes more like a UGC platform, right? That rather than build like vibe coding tools to build games, it's build the vibe coding tools in the game.
Yes.
Right? Or that the natural didactic way in the game to create things, to create experiences, however that works in that world, in that game, enhance that with that technology there. The players won't necessarily know they're vibe coding at all.
Yes, and they're just impacting the experience in a
Right.
way that just ideally would become very smooth. And now we go to the question that I'm getting a lot when I'm talking to traditional game developers and game designers about that. But okay, if you don't have control, like what do people talk about then? And I've been always thinking that even if there would be a game where my job is, I don't know, like escape from a prison cell, even if I might do it in a different way than the other, there will still be something to discuss. So of course it's up to the game designers to figure out what are the kind of shared hooks and then what is the things where people can be creative, so how to build that. But
Where's the boundary?
Exactly. I'm not a game designer, but that fascinates me.
Yeah, and this is definitely an interesting space, and I think one of an area for speaking of innovation and challenge, I think that there are games that we can make today that don't require that per se, but I think that one of the challenges for those making AI games is to learn how do we harness the technology to get those type of experiences. I will say though, rather recently I learned a new term.
Okay.
Describing a kind of, like you have a lot of Roblox, it's not Roblox specifically. Let's just say there are games out there that are just very casual and people just hang out and you play and the graphics aren't that good and it's mostly just hanging out. Yeah, it's friend slop.
Friend slop?
Friend slop.
That's a term?
Friend slop,
wow.
yes.
You name drop.
Yeah. So you know what? It was my high school son's girlfriend who introduced me to that, describing some games that they were playing. And she's like, it's just friend slop. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I was like,
You repeat?
and it perfect, that was like, because it was just like flavor of the month sometimes. Some of these games, we're just gonna jump in and play.
Whatever.
It's just a thing for us to fool around. And so I'm not saying that's what we should create per se, or that's the only future. But there is definitely a market for sometimes people just want an entertaining environment. They want something to do with their friends. I think sometimes as game designers, our bar is so high for what needs to happen that we can look down on the friend slop genre more than we should.
Yeah. And it seems that there is always the implicit assumption that the game or the experience needs to control 100% of the player's attention, whereas in these kinds of games, it's a casual, the kind of like side thing. It's kind of like the fire in the middle, and then you're actually having the chat, and the fire like there is just there to create the atmosphere.
A little bit like going to the mall in the 90s and early 2000s.
Yeah, hanging out there, and then
You don't have money to buy anything anyway. So it's just going in circles, chatting with your friends.
chatting with
right?
your friends.
Yeah. Yeah, I am very excited for what I think we're going to come up with, and I agree that I think that we'll see an entire range. We talked about this in the recent podcast too. I think there's going to be a range of experiences that generative AI is going to create with games, and some of those will look a little more traditional, and some of them will look maybe much more like a entertainment experience as opposed to what we could traditionally consider a game. Do you see? So when we think about the innovation here, and this was something we were talking about as well too. So Supercell is known for a lot of mobile games, right? Does Supercell, or do you guys think about AI as is AI a genre, or is it like a platform and technology more similar to like mobile or VR or consoles? Is it in that category, or is it in these are FPS games and RPG games and they'll be AI games? Is there a sense that like when you describe it and other people are like, how do I think about this in the game industry? Do you have a way to help people understand it? What's your take on that?
I would see it actually as both, because
Okay.
there can be games that can be built on top of AI technologies, like for example different assistant technologies. You can build games on top of those as a platform, so that could be one. But then it's also a kind of like technological enabler for building features that might be the main features, or then they might be the side features. So it opens up new possibilities. So I think that it enables us to do both. And I do see a world where we will both have new categories emerging that are AI powered, that's something that we haven't seen before. But also I'm foreseeing a world where AI features will slowly be like creeping in all kind of genres. So I see that impacting both ways.
A little bit of a I love tangents. As these AI features creep, like we touched a little bit on earlier when we were talking about the innovation lab and what blocks. We've had episodes when we discuss unit economics, and I wonder how you see unit economics when you. It's clear when you're talking about the development of a game that you don't have that sort of problem because you can amortize over the life of the game. But when you're running inference inside the game as part of the game loop, it's clear that at least now it's very expensive. And I wonder, there's the question of how do you solve that? How do you make it cheap enough? But then there's also the question of like, how do you morph your monetization strategy to mirror that recurrent cost or that marginal cost on whenever people play? The more they play, the more they cost you. And I wonder if that's something that you guys have looked into. Is that something that you expect innovation to come? Is consumer behavior changing already? Are people just now increasingly more okay to pay a subscription, like a downright subscription versus a game pass or a battle pass for the game or outright tokens? What are you seeing from the monetization side that matches the innovation that we see on the AI side?
Yeah, so we of course are most widely known for our free-to-play games. And that is like the core monetization mechanics in our games, and especially in those kinds of games, this is a big problem.
Yes.
Of course, we have been thinking about that heavily. And we are looking into different solutions to that. Of course, we are looking into how we can push some of the inference to different areas. So we are building an inference engine where we can actually push some of the compute to the end user's device or then to the edge, and then try to minimize the inference costs in areas where we actually have to then incur variable cost for that. So of course, that is something that we are preparing for in the future. And of course, we are preparing all different kinds of strategies for model fine-tuning, distillation, and having very specific smaller models doing specific tasks and like preparing for that kind of world. And we are also thinking about innovating in the monetization space. So that is an area that we see that there might be opportunities. But at the end of the day, it comes down to like how much ARPU are you able to make per player and what are your variable costs of running that. So even without business model innovation, if you can find that balance in a smart way, so there's a lot of leeway. All of that being said, I still think that at Supercell and I think the industry at whole is still in a phase where we are still trying to nail the user experience. So it's a little bit like premature scaling to think too much about these things, because we haven't, as an industry of like folks building AI games, we haven't really nailed the user experience. So I think that we should focus, and that's what I try to ensure that we are really focusing at Supercell, is first nail the player experience, be obsessed about that one, and then we'll figure out the scaling like when we get the player experience right.
Thank you, because this is a topic I want to tell you. Okay, so the reason is, so at JM&T, like part of our idea was like when we started out, it was way too expensive. In fact, that was one of the questions a bunch of investors asked us, and part of our answer was like, we're a startup, we're going to take risk. Like you have to just, if we wait for it to be too cheap, we're going to be behind anyway. But there is this kind of cold start problem, like a chicken and egg problem, right? So, because I've talked to other colleagues in the industry, and there are different studios. Supercell's taking a very particular approach, and there are others that are basically, not going to name names, but sitting on the sidelines waiting for the innovation to happen before, or both the cost getting low enough and the clarity that there are players who want these experiences before they decide they're going to move forward. But I do think that there's a challenge because, in my experience, if we are waiting for OpenAI or Anthropic or any of the other bigger hyperscalers to build the technology in a way that is useful for the game industry, I think we're going to wait too long, right? Because I don't think, to your point, we don't know if that's a big enough audience. They're not going to focus on it. And it has some unique real-time constraint. It has some, I'm not saying we're the only industry that has those, but there's a bunch of other industries that don't have those constraints. So I think OpenAI, I'm not saying that OpenAI doesn't want to make games or something, but they've got such a backlog of just enterprises and so many other kind of industries that can take advantage of it without those innovations. So I think it's up to us in the game industry to make those innovations. And I think this is a challenge because if we don't know how to monetize it and we don't know how to fund it, if we're waiting for we got to wait to know what the player experiences are before we're going to, there's a chicken and egg problem. So do you see the Innovation Lab as being like something to help push forward on this? Like what's your thought on this problem?
So I see it's first going on to the kind of models that like being specific to generic versus specific for gaming. When we're talking about machine learning models, it always boils down to training data. Right. And it happens to be that gaming industry is one of the industries that has massive amounts of data easily available. They're digital, there's a lot of like events that we're tracking. So like when it comes to training data, it's a treasure trove of potential training data. So I absolutely see there a unique opportunity for gaming industry to be able to build something very unique and something specific, because there is the data, there is the technical knowledge, and there is the kind of like creative ambition level. So I think that when you bring those together, that's a massive opportunity. But what I see is that is something like if the gaming industry would now just go to the chamber for 2 years to develop our own like models, and we don't even know what the player experience we're trying to build, it wouldn't make any sense. So I see existing kind of more generalist models, if you want, are excellent tools for us to prototype and really like quickly try to prototype and find and be innovative and be creative and find new ways of how to inspire players of having fun and spending time with the experiences. And then when we find it, I think that then the question is like, how do we then build something more industry specific, something more unique, something that scales better? So I see it like maybe this highlights, I come from the startup side, I've been a founder for 15 years. For me, it's a very natural instinct that when you are pre-product market fit, everything you think about scaling is waste. You should only be obsessed and focused on the product market fit. And then when you hit product market fit, yes, you will have a hell of a hurry to actually get to the scaling phase. But you know, everything you do in a scaling phase, most of the projects will never hit product market fit. So the more you waste resources on the pre-product market fit side on thinking about the scaling, that is total waste. You will decrease your odds of actually finding the success. And this has been a space where it's been very hard to find product market fit. I don't know, there's certain AI games like you guys have built and some of the first like forerunners, and we'll have some really good demos today here at the Mixer tonight. And there's like glimpses of product market fit.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
And now, like when those glimpses turn into a kind of like new dawn, then I think it's the time for us to start to really, as an industry, think about how do we bring it to the next level. But I would still say that we should be really obsessed now on figuring out what the players want. What can we create that is more fun to them? And that's at least what we're trying to do. And that's what the AI Innovation Lab is. That is the place where we want to bring the crazy people with the most ambitious ideas and really allow them to test and try and validate these concepts as much as possible. So that's what we are most excited. And then after that, it's up to them. We might invest in them, or we might help them as a publisher, or they might want to come to Supercell to build these future games. So that's exciting.
So one of the concerns I normally raise is that the way I see a lot of games coming into existence is that people playfully create an experience that they wanted. Right? They mod a game, they create some silly game, and then they upload it like a Flash game, and they put it out there in the BAM's world, and it becomes viral. Right? And one of the problems I constantly see is that if your game starts gaining any popularity, your credit card bill goes up because people are playing it, and that consumes tokens. And that censors, of course, for people who are thinking, I'm going to start a company, I want to build this game, they're ambitious, and they also have a vision of what they want to build, they can get into an accelerator, they can talk to some rep of OpenAI. There's ways of getting away from that problem, at least during the experimentation phase. But if you are a 16-year-old kid on your parents' basement just hacking for fun, and something goes viral, you immediately get censored because if this gets popular, it's too expensive.
But I think like one of the learnings from the startup world is that the team building from 0 to 1 might be a totally different one than the team building from 1 to 10. And that is exactly what we learned at Supercell also. We have certain game designers and teams that are excellent in creating something new, but then when it comes to the scaling phase, we might have totally different experts in that phase. And I think that is also something that should be thought about. Maybe this 16-year-old kid, maybe he doesn't care about scaling, he doesn't care about user acquisition or all of that stuff. He just wants to build something cool. That's all he wanted. And we can see that in Grow Garden, where it started off with like really indie, and then it got handed over to other people who then are better able to accelerate it. So I think that is probably the pattern we're going to see, that there will be then other resources that will help solve the scaling problems.
I see. So just to repeat what I heard, because what you're saying is like the 16-year-old kid puts something out there, it becomes viral, he gets scared because it gets a big deal, but then someone comes and say, hey, I saw what you did.
A publisher.
It's very cool. A publisher is like, hey, Joe Montana.
And we specialized in that. We know how to scale these things. We'll help you sort it out. That's what we're starting to see now in the emerging market.
Yeah, I think there will be that. I think there are some challenges. I think we can get through them, but there are some differences in that. Like, okay, so if someone makes the AI equivalent of Flappy Bird, right? Like they're not additional costs when that thing goes. It may be near impossible to monetize. Some of these experiences may be interesting enough to go viral, but not interesting enough too easily monetize right away as we're exploring. Like in League of Legends, when we started too, yes, there was early product market fit because there was a bunch of other examples that we also looked at, played tested with the team, had an audience. And then like almost my entire time at Riot was just holding on for dear life as we tried that scaling experience. And I think we can learn something from the live service game or the MMO environments from a couple of examples, because we do, as long as we're doing generative AI where there is a server-side component. So on-device really unlocks and changes everything here. And I think that's very important.
Absolutely.
And as long as we have a server-side component, there's some challenges, and I think you could look to live service, the economics and challenges of live service games and MMOs a little more, both in terms of how to either maybe monetize them or build them. And you don't find a lot of indie 16-year-olds building MMOs or building live service games. And I think until we develop the like on-device models or other types of things, it's still a little too much of that, because like, again, if I have my live service game, I built my little live service game and it takes off, well, like the amount of infrastructure behind it. And I just want to add to it is it, sorry, to the other point that we had made before though, is like today in the live service space, not so much MMOs because they're still very niche, but in the live service space, today you can go to hyperscalers, and you have companies like a Cellbyte and Pragma and Microsoft's PlayFab that like give you a back end that you don't have to build. But that was not true when we first started making live service games. So we do not have the PlayFab equivalent of an AI back end, and we won't, to your point, until we get enough product market fit that there's like the need to build those. So those first couple people are going to get squeezed.
But I think I feel like
It's going to be a hustle.
the analog that you are describing there is Roblox, right? Like the people who are creating these sort of multiplayer games that don't want to worry about the back end and the marginal costs and all of that end up being the people who are building experiences in Roblox, right? Like Roblox hence takes care of all of that. And
so you could argue if someone can build the AI equivalent
correct.
of
I
Roblox
think
environment, but you have to have the monetization there too.
and you have to have the PMF.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, what do you guys think if there would be, like, let's assume that there are these like AI games now hitting product market fit. And I don't come from the gaming industry, so I'm not exactly sure of what are the really like characteristics of the best publishing company in the world. But for an AI game, how do you think, like, what would a world's best AI game publisher look like? What would they need to have? What the problems would they need to solve for these teams?
What kind of question is it? It's interesting because typically publishers provide a couple of things, right? Like some of it is helping a team find product market fit, right? Like a lot of times what publisher provides is you've got a team that has the skill to make games and has a vision or passion or connection to a particular genre, but they may not have all the market data or know how to communicate with, they certainly may not have the branding and all that kind of stuff to take it to market. So there's one, but sometimes they can also come in, a publisher can come in and be like, I know you have this lovely game, I know you love this game idea, but let me tell you right now, there's not a market for it. So sometimes it can even be a very early engagement there. So there's just in general kind of helping people understand the business side of it. But there is a lot also from back end. These days, many publishers will also operate. So the question is, what is that operation? And there is a challenge for studios of how much you wed yourself to that operation stack. So like, for example, if I'm publishing a game in China, I know that I'm using like NetEase's or Tencent's like back end. Like that's just, even if I have a different one that I've built on my own, or I have it in North America, Europe, I'm going to use because if they're going to operate it, I'm going to run it in their infrastructure. So one question is providing that kind of operational infrastructure in a way that developers can iterate quickly. And that could be the PlayFab or Cellbyte kind of infrastructure. I think there would be some of that so that they can focus on ideally it's focus on building the game.
So how would that be different for an AI game, or is it different? Is there something specific that AI games need the publisher to solve for them?
I think it changes over time, to be very honest, because if you think of the very early mobile games or very early VR games, I think what a publisher brings in is just that those may be great game makers, but they're still some of the first people exploring this space. So maybe nobody knows the right mechanics for working in VR or on mobile or whatever. And a publisher hopefully should have a bigger view, working with multiple studios to help provide and share best practices. But I think one of the challenges in the beginning is that those first early innovators, everyone and this is my opinion, there's going to be different opinions, everyone has to get their hands more dirty. Because to really push the boundaries with a new medium or technology, you have to get your hands dirty. So I think today, it would require like a lot closer connection of the innovation that's happening, right? It'd be like, we need a model to do something it's never done before, or we need an inference that's never worked. Whereas once that's happened, once we get a couple iterations, then it'll be like, look, we got all the tools. I don't know that it's building AI game engines, but it's that sense of if you didn't have Unreal and you didn't have Unity, what does a publisher bring to the table? Often what they were bringing were proprietary engines that you were building in.
I think this is really fascinating because we're looking at the birth of a new category at least. That's at least that we're super bullish on. And when thinking about that, when you need to innovate both on the product side, maybe on the business model side, on the live ops side, then the question comes, can there even be any external publisher that will help you solve the problems, or do the pioneers actually have to be the ones who actually sort out these problems and integrate all the way, and then when it emerges, maybe then that can be productized into a kind of publishing operation? I don't know. I don't come from the industry, but it's just fascinating for me to.
The publishers only recently, I would argue, understand how to operate live service games, right? The live service games are 15, if you go back to WoW, even much older, if you could count some MMOs. But like for a long time, if you were a game studio, just how to negotiate the business deal on a live service game, let alone finding publishers. Now, publishers are definitely much more mature about that now. But in the beginning, we were all figuring it out together. And the first couple that went out, like Riot and several others, did self-publish. So either it is the innovators building a lot of that, or there's just a closer collaboration. Maybe there's someone smarter out there that we can figure this out, but that's not what we had to do.
For me, it seems like the role of a publisher is to de-risk, right? Like it's a hit-based business, and the publisher's role is to take some of the upside and de-risk for the game developer, the 16-year-old in the basement. So the question then becomes, what are the risks that arise in an AI world that weren't before? And I keep going to suddenly, I don't know, you owe OpenAI your life and the next out of the blue, or your model did or said something weird that now has you in a jail, or I have no idea. I think, whatever new risks appear when you have a stochastic parrot as part of the game, someone with a risk appetite is going to have to take over that, and that way you can focus on the game and someone took the risk from your hands.
Yes. I think that is fascinating overall when you're moving from these kind of software 1.0 fully deterministic systems into this software 2.0 now probabilistic systems, and especially in the gameplay side, when suddenly the game makers no longer have full control of the experience. So that absolutely opens up new risks that can happen. But on the other hand, the risk in a way, there's like downside risk, but there's also an upside risk. So there might be also some magical things that happen. But then it's the game makers just need to accept the fact that they have less control, and it might be good or it might be bad. So I think that's also a mindset thing that needs to be.
Yes, and that's something that the publishers, if you go into publishing, you probably, like you said, it takes time to get that experience. I don't think there's any publisher right now that really knows what the risk of this system is. So when they're trying to go into the spreadsheet, and they're like, oh, okay, how much do we expect from a damage from here? Where's the liability?
Yes.
Okay, so the only counterpoint I'll have is that depending on your audience, game players bring their own risk in many ways in types of UGC, or in fact, one of the early areas that we saw a lot of application of machine learning in the game industry was in toxicity, and
some experience.
It is a little different if depending on who your audience is. If you're building a game that's for a younger audience, the bar there is a little higher, and we might see these games be pushed out into audiences that have more tolerance for that in the beginning. It's not that we don't have any risk for it. It's part of who your audience is, what your market segment is. So we've dealt with that a little. Now we're going to have to find some new tools to be able to make the promises. We're not making the promises to the kids. We're making the promises to the parents. Let's just be real. The kids are not interested in the promises at all.
The contrary of it.
But we want to try to make keep those promises we make to parents, right? So those will be, I think, challenges we still need to face.
I wonder if AI brings faster, which we are seeing in a sense, faster product velocity, both in games and in tech. Does that also come with more volatile recurrent revenue? Like Cursors famously grew from 0 to I don't know how many millions in ARR, but presumably it's also a much less stickier audience because competitors are popping out left and right. Is that a type of risk that is even more aggravated in games because games can be more ephemeral? Like we talked about friend swap, games come and go all the time in Roblox. Is this something that's aggravated? And does that become a risk that a publisher will then take? We're looking at a portfolio of fast fashion games, and we know how to manage like tiny life cycles of games.
I think that there's some agreement in the industry that most of the playtime is still going to the old games, and that's been like the amount of playtime going to the top long time ago published games, it has been growing. So I think that is in a way a counter data point from the current situation in the market where actually people want to stay with the same games and there's this longevity and the whole like surgeons of like live ops and all of that. So I think that there is this trend, and now will AI disrupt this? I'm not sure. I still think people have this kind of like urge and need to have something like stable and something more static. But maybe the kind of like the hits, maybe they become inside the kind of games that then in a way become platforms when you provide UGC tooling, for example, for your users, and then actually these hits can become inside a game. There could be these trends of some mini games, or people create something, or there's a new craze like a TikTok virality that people do some, I don't know, like dances in a sandbox game, or I don't know, whatever, something like that we're going to see. But I haven't at least yet seen indicators of that, but that's interesting to see.
Do you have, you mentioned you have a long background in startups and in technology. Do you have a game in mind that you've played, that you enjoyed, that you think, there's this thing we could maybe do now with AI that I wish I could have had in that game? Like there's an example of a game experience you've had in the past that you think AI could have changed it for the better?
One thing, like I was a massive gamer in the Commodore 64 times, on the early PC times, and I used to love the point and click adventures. And how frustrating it was when the kind of like the content ended, when you had finished that. So if there would be a way for me to, for example, spend more time in the Monkey Island world, for example, so like whatever that way is, but just to be able to immerse myself and spend more time in that one. So I think that could be something pretty interesting. That's one example that I can think of. But that's not like a totally new genre, but I was just going back to my own history.
I think it is a good question for those of us that are like, hey, so I've been in the game industry, but I'm also a technologist, and there's a lot of temptation at times to be like, and in fact, sometimes criticism within the game industry, be like, Aaron, you got some shiny new tech and you just want to figure out how to play with it in games. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to your point of the product market fit is around that question, right? What does it really bring that's new? What is a game experience that we've had that either could have been enhanced or that we could never have had before because of this technology? And I think we're starting to your point, have glimpses of these. And I'm curious if you see other glimpses, because I like I finished the game, but I'm like, I'm not ready to leave yet. Let me play more, which may or may not be healthy, or like everything else into like sticking into games forever. But what else?
Yeah, but I think that the exploration, the glimpses have been too scattered around the concept of traditional game, whereas I see it more as a question of time spent. And I think that it's more about, and how we're looking at it in the AI Innovation Lab, is that we're looking at it as a kind of competition for the time spent of entertainment purposes. And we at Supercell overall, we don't consider any of the other gaming companies our competitors. Those are our best, our industry partners. We consider the social media as our competitors, because that is actually like really eating up on the time spent. And similar way, when we're looking at these new innovations, we're not thinking it only about what is the like incremental improvement or like what is the permutation you can make from a traditional game engineer, but it's more like how do people spend time and how to leverage the IP we built and what is the new way how people actually want to spend their time. And we're seeing these glimpses of novel kinds of ways how especially the younger generation spend time, and that is something that is super fascinating to me.
Okay, so I have to share a bit of a story about what happened with Retail Mage that you might know. I don't know if you know this one.
Probably.
You maybe told me all my stories. No, because when we were starting to show an earlier prototype at GDC 2 years ago, and this goes to the attitude around folks in the industry right now. And granted, this was 2 years ago, but even still, it was a very early prototype. But we had really good response in a bunch of other areas. And it was, at that particular prototype was actually more loose. Like you could take a particular narrative or game experience and you could just go with it. And we could generate new levels, you could build the narrative. To your point, like you could get to what would be the end and you could just keep going. And interestingly, when we would talk to folks in the game industry, a lot of publishers at the time, they're like, I see it, but like I don't understand it. Like they're looking for more game, something that was more looked and felt and quacked more like a game for them. And so one of the reasons that we shipped Retail Mage the way we did is we were trying to find how can we find something that looks and feels more like a game, but has just these parts of AI in it that make you go, wait a second, I've seen a job simulator before, but I could never do that. And I think we achieved some of it, but the counterpoint was that sometimes people don't realize that Retail Mage is an AI game because we may have accomplished that part too much. But part of it was a message to go back to some folks in the game industry to say, look, here's something that you'll be able to understand better and see this kind of iterative change as opposed to sometimes the leap was so big. I don't know if that was always true. Like when I would have actually younger play testers, I had some people that would just play this game forever. But you go to some of the other, they're like, I know what a game looks like and this doesn't look like a game to me and I don't know how to talk to you about it.
I'm just wondering, like, if your players love it and they play, and then industry folks hate it, why did you listen to the industry folks rather than the players?
Well, some of it was they had bigger checkbooks than I did at the time.
Problem that AI Innovation Lab could solve.
But when we talk about how we create this innovation, I think that it's an overall, one of the things that we've been talking about throughout this whole conversation is we need to innovate in the industry. And there's a lot of different challenges. There's a lot of different approaches. We see different studios, different organizations taking those. I'm not saying that Jam&T did it all right. And I think it's an interesting kind of challenge to the industry as a whole, right? And what you guys are doing is an example of saying, this is the way we're going to help solve this problem.
Yeah. And we really want to find teams like yours who have this frustration of trying to build something and then whatever structures, whatever blockers are like hitting you in the face and like pushing you like 2 steps back where your original vision was maybe something more ambitious. And I think that the builders in this AI game space, we need to have a safe space where we can actually go like insanely ambitious and insanely crazy without the kind of structural limitations.
Crazy.
Yes.
Crazy safe space.
That is where innovation happens,
Right.
especially because we're talking about category defining innovation. We're talking about totally new kinds of ways of people spend time.
Yeah. No, you're gonna you're gonna have to fail like times. Like you're gonna put out stuff that you thought was fun and you get it in front of players, but if we do, you have to just iterate. Iterate.
And one of the approaches we're having is that we want to increase the velocity of those ones. We want to increase the ambition level, and we want to ensure that the quality of the shots on goal are high, but we want to increase the velocity significantly so we can move faster and validate them faster and then do quick pivots. So that is definitely a big part of the process that we're building.
I do want to just say, and like, honestly, I truly am appreciative for the work on this because I do know that there are a lot of studios that are exploring internally, and for a number of reasons, right? There's some questions around, like AI is not always seen as favorably in some creative areas and everything else, and so they're not being as public about the work that they're doing for a number of different reasons. And so I think it's helpful to have some examples that are out there, like saying we're going to do this and we're going to innovate in a more public way. I think it'll encourage others to try to do so, both indies and other studios. And so I am really excited to see what comes out of this.
Yeah, we're also really excited, and we really want to bring the community together, community of game builders and AI hackers coming together and figuring out what is the future of how people will spend time in digital experiences. I think that is just absolutely fascinating. That's at least what motivates me here.
Earlier you mentioned that, so you say like you're competing against all entertainment. So you're competing against TikTok, social media, YouTube, whatnot. And then you were bullish on basically 2 axes. One is the interactive experiences like assistants and companions, and the other one was more like what Nuno will call the playful creation.
Yes.
What do you see in these that stack against TikTok? Because one thing that I keep bringing up, like I keep, it comes up in many different ways, but it's just like if you're standing from a point of view of TikTok as my competitor, it doesn't get, it's hard to get cheaper content than the one they have, and so accessible as you're just swiping for the next dopamine hit. So I guess my question is, what do you see in these 2 bullish areas that you're in these 2 areas in which you're bullish, that holds its ground against TikTok?
I think it's a very good question, and I don't have a direct answer because TikTok is anyway, especially the normal algorithm loop is more like a lean-back experience, and the examples that I mentioned were more where it's like
Active.
an interactive and active. So that is something that I'm also trying to figure out. What is the type of entertainment experience that actually caters to the same kind of lean-back experience? So that is something that I'm also interested in, the kind of AI-generated entertainment space. What would be the lean-back experience that AI powers there? That's what I don't know, but that's something that we absolutely want to somehow explore.
Gotcha. So if you have an idea for a lean-back AI entertainment, apply to the AI Innovation Lab.
Absolutely.
I think I covered all the questions I had for Otto. Do you have anything we should have asked?
I think we had a really good chat in many areas, and I'm just super excited about our San Francisco AI Innovation Lab and trying to bring the community like today in the mixer. So really looking forward for finding ways of how we can also be helpful and how we can work together and how we can together as a community show the rest of, especially the ones who don't believe in this whole thing, so actually showing them like what we can build together.
Yeah, I thank you for inviting us here too. I'm excited about seeing these type of efforts, and I really appreciate your point of it's an effort of the broader industry. Something I think we've been trying to say is we're game creators too. We want a healthy, vibrant industry of creating games that respect creators and build great, fun, joyful moments for players. And we're only going to do that by leaning in, I think, and understanding how to leverage the technology on behalf of players and also on behalf of creators. And I think yes, like that kind of invitation for folks to work together is how we get there.
For those that want to apply or want to just be part of the community that you're essentially building, how can they reach out to you? How can they pack their application so it really catches Otto's eyes? Message to those who are interested.
Yeah, so we have our AI Lab site at ailab.supercell.com, and we also have a Discord server that will include Supercellians, applicants, and also alumni from the previous program. So it's a great way to come join the discussion and think about it. And also, you'll see in the application form, I think that we're looking for the bold rebels, the misunderstoods. So if you feel
pirates.
Exactly, if you feel that way, then please apply. Like this is the resistance. We're building the resistance. So everybody's welcome.
All right, that's fantastic.
Well, Otto, thank you so much for inviting us. This is awesome. This feels so professional.
This is the AI Innovation Lab.
Yes,
so
there we go.
It's only boxes here, but soon it's actually going to be full of magic happening
it gives this vibe of it's time to build, right?
It is.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ramon. Thank you, Aaron. It was a pleasure and excellent chat, and I also learned a lot, so thank you so much. Looking forward for continuing our conversations.
Will do.
Great.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the full episode. We really hope you enjoyed the discussion. It would help us out a ton if you subscribed to the show on your platform of choice, as well as shared it with folks you think would find it useful. You can always check out playingwithinference.com to get in contact with us, join our Discord, or just find the links to the episodes. See you next week.